All right, what's up, everybody? Wes Mitchell here, Chris Clark as well. Sorry for the slight delay there, working with a little bit of new technology here and continuing to try to make this thing as, continue to try to build on it and make it better. And I think if we do it like this, it'll let us sort of schedule up
They're working with a little
these
bit of new technology here.
shows as opposed to having to sort of fly by the seat of our pants and, embed them after we go live. So, hopefully makes it just a little bit easier on everybody. Obviously, I'm Wes Mitchell. He is Chris Clark. And let's see if I can bring Chris in here now, side by side. What's going on, man?
Hey, man. Yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, we're always flying by the seat of our pants here. I told Chris like 10 minutes ago, hey man, we're gonna try this new thing. So we had to get something new downloaded there, but I think we're live and ready to go. And eventually, this is going to let us sort of brand everything up a little bit more, and actually lets us very easily see your questions here on the side. So yeah, if you have questions, y'all know the drill. If you're watching, there's several places you could be watching right now. If you're watching on our front page or on our message board, you're probably embedded there. So just click through to watch on YouTube, and then you can actually hit the little chat as Kelly just did, and we will very quickly see your questions. If you are on the Insiders Forum, then I will be constantly checking that embed as well, just because we obviously want to make sure all our paid subscribers are taken care of. But you should be able to see us in a number of places right now, and we appreciate you joining in. Let's see. Kelly, thank you for your podcast and for doing an awesome job of reporting. We appreciate that, Kelly. We'll start with this question because Kelly is buttering us up here. Appreciate you joining us, and appreciate we got a few people on here already. Appreciate everybody joining in. I personally like Muschamp, but most of my friends want him fired. Do you think Muschamp can lead the Gamecocks to a better year? Coming out firing Kelly. I think the interesting thing about the way this has played out, as far as the Will Muschamp era at South Carolina, Chris, is I would say, the very first year there was overachievement. You go from taking on a program that won 3 games and lost to the Citadel the year before to going to the bowl game. I would say competing hard in all the games that they played. Had a chance to win the bowl game and actually finish above 500. Then, year 2, you win 9 games. And I think there's improvement shown. You get a bowl win over a historic team in Michigan. And then year 3, I think we saw that the offense at the time, I remember thinking, man, this offense under Brian McClendon has started to take off. And there were some ups and downs, as we saw, some moments where the offense was very explosive, and then some moments where it was 3 and out and punt very quickly, with the hurry up stuff. So, but I think we all sat there and said, if this team hadn't had so many injuries in year 3, then they could have won even more games. And then I think the bowl game left a bad taste in everybody's mouth, right? You go into the next year, and there's this talk about this could be the best team Muschamp has had. And I think looking back, that talk hurt him as far as the expectation and the perception of the team. So it's very easy, and I get it, because I think if Will Muschamp was on here with us, he would say, 4 wins is not going to cut it. So if you're agreed, Chris.
Yeah. I mean, four with everything, or the 4-win thing.
The 4-win thing. So,
but yeah, the 4-win. No, it's not going to cut it.
Yeah, I think he himself would say that, and he has said as much.
Yeah.
But I think so. Yes, you get the frustration, and here's the thing. In some ways, you want people to be frustrated with that, because it beats the alternative, which is that people don't care, that they don't give a crap. So you want your program to be one where people are still invested, because you'll take that over just people having no interest whatsoever, every single day and twice on Saturday. But, I think there's still a very bad taste in everyone's mouth after last year. Now, my point being, going into probably midway through 2018, we were all saying this program is still, I would say, on the rise. And then now we look at last year, we look at the way 2018 ended, and then last year, and there's all of a sudden a lot of people that have just, there's some people, I should say, like Kelly's friends, that have kind of just given up. So I would say my answer to that would be that if Carolina has a good year, then you completely turn that on its head, and all of a sudden, those people that are very frustrated and sort of over it are right back in it. And then you look at, I think, what could be, and some people are going to hate me even bringing this up, Chris, but I think the 2021 class right now, we always knew was going to sort of have to be an evaluation class, was going to be one that South Carolina probably was going to have to get some under the radar guys, was going to have to evaluate and develop. 2020 class was very good and had some really good top end players that I think we're going to see on the field this year, God willing that we have a season. So my point being is 2022, you look ahead, that could be a banner year, starting with potentially adding Gunnar Stockton. And then you add a quarterback like that to the table early on, who knows who he can bring in with him. Gunnar Stockton, for people who don't follow recruiting, a consensus like top 10 quarterback in the country for 2022. So I think we have such short sort of attention spans with sports that it turned on Muschamp very quickly, but that doesn't mean it can't turn back with a good year this year. And I know I'm rambling for like 4 minutes here, Kelly, but your actual question is, do you think Muschamp can lead the Gamecocks to a better year? I think, again, the schedule is going to be tough. 10 SEC teams is never going to be easy. You have to change the expectations, I think. What is a better year to everyone? Is 5-5 progress? I think 5-5 in SEC only play is actually progress and something you build on if you're taking, which we've seen Ray Tanner in South Carolina, they're taking a long-term, build the foundation approach to the program, right? They're not going the quick fix route.
Yeah.
It's long-term, build up a foundation and build the program. It's not hire and fire in 3 years, is what I mean by that. So progress is not always linear. There's going to be up and downs along the way. And I think this is, the other side is this is a pivotal year for Will Muschamp. But I think some of that is complicated by all the other things we've talked about all offseason that the staff has dealt with as well. So that is my completely long-winded take on that, Chris.
No, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there in what you said, but it's a pretty complex thing. And I mean, I like talking about stuff like that with coming from a lot of different angles, because, it at the end of the day, it's about wins and losses in college football. And so it does become black and white of, okay, that this is not good enough or this is, right. And at some point people have to make that decision. But how you get there, I mean, this is an interesting situation. This year, so this year across college football, you shouldn't expect as much change. A, financially, schools are going to be strapped. B, the circumstances are so different. Conference only schedules. Some schools aren't even playing. So if we do play, it's going to be a lot different. The preparation's different. The schedule's different. The finances are going to weigh in. So just a lot different. So progress is definitely going to be measured a little bit differently this year. Really, it's just about stabilizing things. Will Muschamp, when he walked into this situation, I think you laid it out perfectly, Wes, as far as like that ebb and flow. And I think there are a few things that have worked against him in fan perception. And obviously, like you said, you got to start at that point where, and Muschamp has said that, he does not want people to accept 4 wins, and he doesn't want to either. That's, by talking about this, we're not saying anything other than that, right? But when he got to South Carolina, the program was not in good shape. Like you said, they just won 3 games. Other programs around them were rising. They're doing better in recruiting. There was a lot of infrastructure that needed to be built and or rebuilt. Okay. So they improved the program the first 2 years. Well, then things sort of fell off the cliff in 2018. Offense became inconsistent, absolute rash of injuries that really, really hurt. The bowl game, right? And then you follow up that really bad bowl game with a really bad, super disappointing loss with all sorts of bad optics against North Carolina this year. And then you win 4 games and you have more injuries and the offense is super inconsistent and it sort of repeated itself, right? And so those are all the things that you have to fix. And with Muschamp, you have sort of this backdrop of people looking at it and say, okay, this is Florida all over again, right? Like if this was if he was a first year head coach, or not first year, a first time head coach, I think there'd be even a little bit more patience with some fans, but they always have this backdrop of making a parallel between this and Florida, right? And it's 2 different situations. Now, on top of all these other things, you've got other SEC schools who have either made changes or they're rising in recruiting or they've done a little bit better on the field. You got Clemson, who's become elite around that same time. Muschamp's first year, 2016, obviously Clemson elite program at that time. It's just, there is an appetite here, and I'm going long-winded too. There's an appetite here in the administration to stick with it. All right. And there's an expiration date. There's an expiration point for that. And that'll have to get sorted out. But if you're going to turn a program around like South Carolina, you have to do some unique things. And maybe getting some stability and staying with things one of them. I'm not saying I have the answer. I know how it's going to play out this season or beyond, but that could be. And I think we'll know in a couple years if this is something that has turned around, which I do think it can. Do you fix the offense, you stabilize, you recruit, you try to build, or does it go in the other direction? And I think there are a lot of examples of even coaches who had a ton of success. Like you look at Gary Patterson at TCU, and I'm not making any comparison between one coach or the other, but you just look at Patterson. He started out, he's 6-6 one year, then he's 10-2, 11-2, then he's 5-6, and then they have a really, really good stretch for about 7 or 8 years. Then they go 4-8 one year. They just had this really bad year. Gary Patterson made a bunch of changes, right? So what I'm saying is, Muschamp changed offensive coordinator. I know it's another offensive coordinator and people are getting tired of that move, but he brings in a new OC. He changes the strength coach. Those are things that we all know, needed to be addressed. And so this is obviously going to be a unique year to sort of implement those changes. But this year, it's not about for me going out and winning a championship this year. It's about taking another step forward, illustrating some type of progress, and then trying to build from there. I do think it can be done. It's proven it can be done at South Carolina. It's always taken a while, to build that up, and so it's going to be very interesting, I think.
Yeah, and we are both, as you said, going long-winded on it. But I mean, I think that's the value of a platform like this, is unlike Twitter, which gets sort of just summarized down into a few characters and everybody misinterprets what you say. And then you have a big fight in your mentions. I've learned about anything I say, I can say the sky is blue, and someone on there is going to find a reason to disagree with me on Twitter. So I do like that we can sort of, just expound on things on here. All right. So the other great thing is I can pop up Jason Brock's question below us so that everybody can see it. And another question. And, I see it's interesting, Chris, a lot of the questions we get on these YouTube lives, you could probably do a top 10 off-season burning questions, because a lot of the times they're not the sort of smaller detail questions. It's sort of the big picture questions about what needs to happen for there to be a successful season for South Carolina. And, I think wide receiver is a question we get all the time. And then zooming out from that, but obviously a related question is, can Mike Bobo's offense be productive enough to complement what could be a pretty decent defense? And I'll stop there. I do think this has a chance to be a pretty good defense, particularly if there's an offense that complements it. I think sometimes we forget that your offense and your defense are married together. And when you're going 3 and out, when you're not moving the football, when you're even worse, turning the football over, your defense gets put right back on the field. And we saw that last year, especially the latter half of the year, man. I mean, when you're trying to go hurry up and it's 3 and out and punt and you're doing it fast and no game time is coming off the clock and no real time is coming off the clock and your defense is right back on the field, it's tough on a defense. So to answer your question, I don't think we should have any expectation for this offense to be like top 5 in the league, light up the scoreboard, scores 32, 33 points a game, something crazy like that. Now, is there an expectation that is fair potentially for this offense to be better, to execute better, to stay on the field longer, to be more efficient? I mean, I don't even know if you want to – I don't know if you want to put a number on it. I don't know what number is even fair, but I would start with that it just looks better. It looks more consistent, that you execute. Now, there is I think a major question here is that, hey, these pro-style offenses a lot of times are a little bit more difficult than sort of your spread-oriented stuff. Now, one thing I have heard after the fact, I shouldn't say directly. This comes from a former player via someone else, was that sometimes South Carolina got so far ahead of itself, Chris, on trying to be a hurry-up offense that it was get to the line and go, get to the line and go, get to the line and go, that they almost outsmarted themselves offensively in that you still have to think through the play and give yourself a chance to make sure you're executing and doing all the right things. So the hurry-up offense has a place, and I still think South Carolina's offense is going to be very multiple, both in play calling, scheming, concepts, formationally, personnel-wise, all those things. And I think they'll go hurry up sometimes. We saw Mike Bobo do that. They'll be methodical other times. But I expect this to be an offense that is more methodical in general. I expect this to be an offense that runs the football a bit more. South Carolina threw it. I can't remember which games it was, but down the stretch, South Carolina threw the ball more than anybody else in the SEC. So that, with the questions at wide receiver, is not a recipe for success. But I will say, you said a 500 season there, Jason, and we appreciate the question. Chris, 500 season is sort of where that's my marker as well. Like if we, and again, I've been on the record that I don't really think that the record, the wins and losses, are that important this year compared to any other year. I think it's more about, do you improve? Is the foundation there? Are you moving forward as a program? Judge the program next year. Honestly, nobody likes to hear that, but that's where I am. It's way more important right now for Muschamp to handle the safety part of everything that goes along with managing 100 kids in the middle of everything with COVID, and managing and helping the kids through everything that they have on their mind about the social justice issues. In my opinion, it's more about managing the kids as people this year. Next year, 2021, I think that's when we go back to wins and losses and production and on the field and all that stuff. But 500, to me, if they go 5-5 with all things considered, then I think you're shaking your head that's okay.
Probably so, and I do think that'll be it'll be a little bit in the eye of the beholder in terms of what fans think, right? Because I mean that can vary.
Yeah, well, that's just where I am, I would say.
Right, and I think I'm with you, and now another thing, we don't know how the schedule is going to be laid out. We know the opponents, we don't know the layout. Do they get four? Do they get a murderer's row 4 weeks in a row? We don't know, and that does play into it. And you do have to temper and manage those expectations, both based on those different things. And look, there's a reality of it too, and that is if this team goes 5-5, really there's not many scenarios in which Muschamp isn't back for 2021, just because of where things are right now, right? So I think people are going to need to lean into that reality. And so that's why it's very important that, given that fact, that they do show some stability on the field, that they do show some improvement, because that's going to help them in recruiting, and then that's going to set them up better short and long term after 2020, right? So, going back to the offense, Wes, I think you made a great point about just being complementary. All the phases complement each other. And the example I always go back to from last year is the A&M game, where if you look at the score, and I've said this so many times, it's like a broken record, but if you go back and look at the story, you'd say South Carolina didn't play well defensively in that game, but they really did at the beginning, and it was just warp speed 3 and outs. I mean, they didn't get a first down for how long was it in that game, and so eventually it just fell apart for them, and A&M was able to make some things happen. The defense was on the field so long, so I think you just look at the baseline of, can you be a little more consistent? Can you even be average on offense? Can you make the defense sweat a little bit more? Can you keep your offense on the field a little bit more? And certainly running the football is going to be a huge part of that consistency, because, like you said, man, at the end of last year, they're throwing the ball a bunch and they don't really have the resources, to throw the ball that much at the end. They were just sort of doing it because that's maybe the best way to win. And nothing was. So you don't want to get caught in that spot. They've got to stay healthy. They got to be a little bit more consistent. And for me, a couple key areas where they were near bottom of the country last year, was just third down conversions on offense and then red zone play in offense. If they can be better in those two key areas, then, you might have an offense that's good enough to sort of play complementary football and help you out. Is either side going to be a juggernaut? No. But South Carolina, for portions of last year and even the year before, even when they were a lot better offensively in 2018, they've just really battled that inconsistency, I think.
Yeah, definitely. All right, let's and appreciate the question, Jason. Everybody else, like I said, get in with your questions. We got Dwayne Wilson coming up next, and says, "Give me your expectations for the offense and defense. Can they be inside the top 30?" He goes on to say that he sees this being a top 30 offense and defense. Chris, I'll get you in on this one. Well, first of all, as things stand right now, the top 25 teams and the top 30 offense and deep, that's a little bit different this year, because right now there's going to be 2 less major conferences. They're going to be tied in to these stats. So everything's going to be a bit skewed. And I don't really know how my mind doesn't work to where I can sort of necessarily factor that into this question right now. But I don't know. I lean much more towards the defense potentially surprising a lot of people and being top 30 than I would say the offense statistically, because let's be honest, the offense, like we're talking about, the offenses that are going to be geared more towards hurry up, aggressiveness, explosiveness, stuff like that, those offenses are very much the ones that are going to put up the numbers in most cases, I would say. So, again, I don't know that points per game, if we're, and again, are we talking points per game? We talking yards per game, yards allowed? If we're talking points per game, I could very easily see the defense getting into that top 30. But if the offense also gets there, then that's a great sign, I would say, for South Carolina's season.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. So, I mean, look, and I'm going to credit Brett McMurphy for this. 4 hours ago, he put this out based on, so 130 FBS programs, right, after New Mexico State postponed to the spring today as well. So out of 130 FBS programs, we got 54 not playing in the fall, 76 planning on playing in the fall right now. So, if you're inside the top 30, normally you would be a good bit higher. Now you're getting closer to middle of the pack, if you're top 30. So I think that is attainable, particularly on defense. Offensively, again, I don't know. I set the bar a little bit lower there offensively, just because they do have, new scheme, and there is so far to go, and I still have some questions, particularly at receiver, in order to get there. Again, they don't have to, I don't even know that they have to be top 30 offensively, to be able to make some noise this year and to be able to win some games. They just have to be more consistent and have to be better in some of those key areas. But I do think it's attainable. certainly when you look at it through the lens of there being 75-ish teams or so, if things keep progressing like they are, in those rankings. And I assume we're going by, FBS total number of schools and national rankings in those.
Yes. All right. Yeah. Keep your questions coming. Love to hear some more. Appreciate you, Dwayne, Jason, and Kelly. Let's see if I can get this off the screen. There we go. All right. So, as far as what we have to talk about today, other than questions, and we'll just hit those as they come in. The SEC marches on, Chris. If you're watching this later on, we're live right now. Obviously, it is 2:30 on Thursday, August 13th, which is actually relevant because this roller coaster has gone up and down at least 100 times this offseason as far as, are we going to play football? And one thing I said on our podcast, Chris, and one thing that's been pointed out to me was just, golly, you are just yanking these kids around right now as far as we're going to play. I mean, the Big Ten players, the ones that wanted to play, right? And the guys that were just sort of all in on, hey, I understand what the virus means. I understand the risk, but I want to play a game I love. These poor guys had a schedule released, an actual literal schedule, Chris, a specific, this is who you're playing on what day. And then 5 days later, they're pulling the plug on them and not playing. So and not that I know there's been literally millions of people that have been affected by COVID with stuff more important than football. We're not losing sight of that, but I do feel bad for these kids because of the amount of time that they put in year-round nearly to playing a game, which on a good year, you get a chance to actually go out with your teammates and play. What if you win the national title, you get 15 games in a season, right? So on a best case scenario, you're a college football player, you get to actually ramp it up and go do this that many times. You get a spring game, you get some scrimmages that don't really count, and otherwise you get practices and you have a ton of conditioning, a ton of rehab, treatments, nutrition, discipline type stuff where you're having to, eat the way you need to, not necessarily maybe the way you want. I mean, all the energy and effort you put into it. And then they're just like, yeah, we're playing. Yeah, we're not. Yeah, we're playing. Yeah, we're not. It sucks for the kids, man. And so I understand if the SEC, I completely understand if the SEC gets to the finish line and just says it's not going to work. But I'm hopeful in the SEC, as much as we've maybe criticized Sankey in the past, warranted in my opinion, I would say that his deliberate approach to this and sort of methodical, slower approach, hey, let's push the season back. Let's get all of our student athletes, let's get all our regular students on campus. Make sure, which by the way, the town hall today, what was the percent positive? A little over 3% as far as students returning to campus of the 7,000 they recently tested. So, point being, let's have a methodical, hopefully safe approach, and then let's have a plan and let's try to stick to it as opposed to all this just back and forth BS. I mean, the Big Ten, Chris, has literally come out in the last couple of days and said, we're going to start looking into spring football.
Yeah.
Like how have you not been looking into what spring football would look like for the last 3 months? Like, if you're going to make a decision, is this better? Is this worse? You don't already have models for what the spring would look like? Like, for one, I don't even know if I believe that because that's insanity. But let's try to figure out a plan. Let's try to move forward. And I've said all that. I hope I had a point when I started talking. But where's your head right now on the chances? I've asked you this 10 times this offseason. Where's your head at on the chances of SEC college football happening in the year of 2020?
The craziest year ever. Well, it has depended on when you've asked me that, and so there's a good reason to ask it. You probably need to ask it like every hour, and then we'll all figure out where we're at on it. But it does seem. It seems like it's going forward. So right at this moment that I'm speaking, it seems more likely than not. But here's the thing, there's a lot of pressure behind the scenes both ways, and we've talked about all the different factors. And people may get mad at me saying some of the factors, but that's okay. It's what people are weighing, and that is public health, perception, liability, player health, financial considerations. All those things are going into it, and people have different opinions. Some people say, "Look, we know about the health issues, but look at the finances. Look at the health benefit, the health problems for players when they don't play, especially like mental health." Other sides are going to say you can't play. It's just too dangerous right now. So there's always this split, and so there's going to be pressure on like the last men standing. Right now, there's going to be pressure on them. The Big Ten would and the Pac-12 would certainly prefer, and maybe the NCAA would even prefer. Now, how much power do they have? Maybe not a lot, but even today, some of the top NCAA people did a conference, and they're saying some things that I don't know if they were meant to. They were meant to sort of sound the alarm, and that doesn't mean they have a motivation behind that, but they said some things that could sound the alarm. You're seeing some things come out from the CDC today about how this fall may be really, really bad if the virus doesn't get under control. And so what I'm saying is all those things are going to go into these decisions. And Greg Sankey, I do think, has done a good thing by he's recognized that it may not be any more feasible to play in the spring. And so given that, I think his sort of argument, or at least line of thinking, has been, we don't need to decide right now, right? Because these other teams, the Big Ten, man, the Pac-12, they're still going to be working out. Still 20 hours, just like they're going into a season, or at least that's the plan right now. And so I do think it's smart to wait, give it a couple weeks and see. If you feel like you got to pull the plug at some point, then we can all argue about whether or not it was right at that time. And we're all going to have some level of different opinion, I'm sure. But it just wasn't necessary to do it that early is what some people are arguing. And I can see that. If the Big Ten was not planning for spring or doesn't have a plan in place, that does sort of seem insane because when the coronavirus first hit, we were all sitting here saying, are we going to have football? Or are we going to have to move it to spring? And those even at one point looked more likely right at the beginning of this thing. So I don't know if I believe that or not. Who knows? But the point is, I think it's smart to wait. And that there are even doctors are going to look at the same data, and they're going to maybe come out with a different opinion of it. The Pac-12's 12 doctors are very concerned. They brought up myocarditis a lot. And that's a whole nother thing. I mean, the cost of it, the screening, how dangerous is it? Myocarditis has been around for a while. I found a report just this morning on a player in 2008 who had strep throat and developed it, and it was really bad. Now he recovered, fortunately. But some people are going to say, with this virus that can cause this and has caused it maybe in some other college football players, the Big Ten said they've had 10 or 15 that they've confirmed. Is that going to give them an even greater risk? So people have different arguments on that. And so it'll be fascinating. I think we'll know more in the next couple weeks, but the SEC for their part and these other schools are waiting it out. And right now they still feel it's safe enough to proceed.
Yeah, they're doing their best to move forward if it's going to be possible, and I think they do. I think they do owe it to, to the players to try to continue to move forward. And then, hopefully they're in a better place. I will say one thing that was brought up by the NCAA council, I believe there's so many different little groups or whatever, but I believe the Division I council, they had put out that chart that said, this is where we expected to be on the daily case rates when we talked about this 2 months ago, 3 months ago, whatever. And then this is where we are. And it was like up here as opposed to down here. Well, there is some positivity. I haven't looked at all the different SEC areas, but at least here in South Carolina, I think in Georgia as well, which had way higher numbers than we ever did, the daily case numbers are starting to trend downward. They have been trending downward, but they're starting to get to a point where you start to feel a little better about it. And I think that, Chris, has always been a factor in this, has been what does it look like locally as far as the bigger picture, which is your COVID daily cases, hospitalization, stuff like that. And our percent positive is trending down. It still needs to go down more, but has dipped down below 20%, needs to get down, I would say, below 10%. But it's trending the right way. The daily cases are trending the right way, which not that we're going to turn this into a big COVID, greater discussion, but I think that is a factor in all of this and a positive thing moving forward, because we're on August 13th, a month and a half from now, or a month and an extra week from now, could our numbers obviously, hopefully, be even better, to the extent that you just feel everybody feels a lot better about having control of this thing, and it's not quite as much, it's not quite as prevalent within our community here in Columbia, in Athens and Gainesville, across the SEC footprint. So I think that's something else to continue to keep an eye on and continue to track as well. As we were doing this, the SCDHEC put out their numbers for today, 907 new confirmed cases, which again is that's several days now below 1,000. Testing was actually up again today, which is a good thing, because that brought the percent positive down to 15.7% for today. So if anybody was wondering about those. Anyway, back to football. We got another question from John here, who is Lintcock on GamecockCentral.com. Now I see with your last name why you're Lintcock. But, all right, he wants to know that Jake Bentley showing enough to go pro with the loss of his season this year. That's a good question. I feel awful for Jake that it appears he's not going to be able to play this year. Chris, I thought he was going to go to Utah this year if everything else was normal, and absolutely tear it up with a new start, new offense. I think a really good program, really good defense out there, playing some Pac-12 defenses that aren't always great either. Sometimes a new start can be great for guys, for anybody, be it student athletes or adults and, in their jobs, whatever. I thought he was going to have a huge year. The thing about Jake Bentley, he did everything right at South Carolina, the way he carried himself. So I'm hopeful. Has he shown enough to go pro? I don't. That's going to be tough, I think, right? I mean, I think now we do know at this point, guys are getting a year back, right, of eligibility. That's been right now. That's been suggested. It has to still be approved.
Right.
That's a formality in almost all cases, I think.
Yep. Yeah, I would think so. I mean, it hasn't been, I guess, formally adopted, but that has been the recommendation. So, yeah, I mean, he'll have a decision to make. A lot of people have decisions to make, and then they're probably going to have to do something with the scholarship limit next year, sort of like they did for baseball and the other sports. But I don't think we know what he's going to do yet. I mean, that's the main thing. This is going to be an extremely interesting, I think, draft next year, right? When you think about it, based on the fact that, if things hold, if some people are going to play, some people aren't, how does all that work? And we just don't know. And so I would think that's the same case for Jake Bentley. I haven't heard any talk about what he may or may not do. I think everybody's going to keep working. Again, as far as I know, these players can just keep working out and stuff. And so we'll have to see, do people play in the spring? Do they not? We don't know any of that. And so I think that's the first step, is figuring all that out, then figuring out, let's say the season's totally lost, which guys take that red shirt and come back, which guys try to go pro based on, sort of stand on what they've already done. Those are things we don't have answers to yet. There's so many. That's been one of the hardest things about this, man. There's been so many times where we've had to say, I don't know. That's a little bit frustrating to me, because our job is to try to find answers to things, or at least pass an opinion on things. And there's been a lot of I don't know in the past few months, for sure.
Yeah. in all in all wakes of life with this thing.
Yeah.
I think so. It's understandable, but yeah, we'll see, man. I mean, it's ultimately going to be up to does Jake want to sort of take that route and try and get drafted, probably a little bit later, or try to go the free agent route, or does he want to come back? And then you start talking. He would have been a 5th-year senior this year. Now you're talking about a 6th year. It's all up to Jake. I have no idea. I wouldn't be surprised just knowing how excited he seemed to be to get out there. Just what I've seen from him on social media. I wouldn't be surprised if he just stuck around and said, "Hey, I'm gonna play next year and ball out and see what happens." But that's completely. I have no idea. That's just based on what I've seen from him on social media, that he seems happy and really seems to have settled in out there. So we'll see, man. I think ultimately the question with all this, as far as football goes, and we're getting a few more comments here, and like Dwayne says, are the player? I know the players are definitely safer under the care of the football program, and like you said, some of these, or most of these teams, it seems like for Pac-12 and Big Ten, are still going to be practicing. They're still going to be working out. They're still going to be together. They're still going to be under the care of the football program. So are they more likely to get the virus or spread the virus if they're playing against other teams than if we don't play other teams, but then take away the incentive of having football, which takes away the incentive for you to bubble up if you're a college football player. Now you're among the general population of the students. It is like I get the point that if they're not playing, they're not potentially passing it on to other campuses. I understand that, to other teams. I understand that. But are their chances of getting the virus actually greater by playing 10 games against another opponent? I don't know the answer. I'm asking that as that's to me, that's the key question in all of this of can you play? Because you're already saying that you're still going to practice. So
yeah, and again, this is another complex thing because it depends on the behavior, right, of some of those individuals. So one thing that we can say, I don't even think this isn't even arguable or controversial, is like if you're saying, all right, we're going to just work out as a team. That's one thing. Then if you add, okay, we're going to also play against a team. Now, presumably they've all been tested, right? So that's the thing. I mean,
yeah,
it's an SEC 3 times a week. But given that, if you do have a guy on the team that happens to have it, or maybe he's, showed up negative, he's actually positive. Yeah, in a game situation, that's just another chance for exposure because football is a very close quarters, violent game. So that's going to give you another exposure. So if you take practice and working out with just your team, that's one thing. That's exposure opportunities. If you add an actual game against another team, however limited it may be, that is another exposure opportunity. And so that's what a lot of people have been talking about is if we put these players out there, or if we allow them to go out there, then we're giving them that other opportunity. Now, the other part of it is, like you said, Wes, if you take those games away, you're right. Because of human nature and player behavior, they may say, well, screw it then, and then they may be more likely because of their own behavior to go out and make decisions, do that. So how much can they weigh that in? I don't know. I think the Big Ten and Pac-12 are looking at it just in terms of the on-field, and they're saying the players are going to have to do they're going to have to do the stuff, the social stuff. We can't control that. We can control whether or not they play. Does that make sense? So
yeah, it does.
Looking at it from that standpoint, now in reality, you may be right. It may be that there's going to be higher incidences when they don't have football, but I think the conferences are looking at it and what can we actually control. So
yeah, and I think there should be more studies. I saw there was a study, I believe, commissioned by Manny Diaz, of all people, the Miami coach, where they tried to see how often within the confines of a game are the same 2 players actually interacting with each other physically where they're within, 6 feet of each other. And I think that's to me, there should be more studies on those type of things. Just what are the chances of transmission between if two teams that have been tested play the game of football? I know that's not an easy question to answer, but surely there's someone smarter than me that can try and answer that question in a scientific nature. Because I think that is a key question to all this. Are the chances very, very low, or are the chances, pretty good? Is what I would love to know. But anyway, we want to talk football. If you got more questions, throw them in, because Chris, we do at least last week we already talked about it. I think we did a live after it. Last week, Muschamp talked for almost an hour, which I believe is his record for a press conference, maybe other than his opening press conference at South Carolina, because we got the actual most football news we've had in a long time. And now South Carolina will be moving forward. We believe the plan is right now to start camp next week. Yeah. So it'll be a little bit different, not your typical camp, but just it'll be a little more spread out, stuff like that. But for the most part, a fairly normal camp will be starting for as normal as it can be. We'll be starting for South Carolina next week. So I'm excited to have some more football to talk about, man. And not really a whole lot of football news so far this week other than the bigger picture stuff. But South Carolina did get some good news. Jalen Brooks officially on the roster, officially a Gamecock, the wide receiver transfer, and someone that I'm curious to see, A, can he get his waiver approved by the NCAA, and B, can he make an impact on South Carolina's team this year?
No doubt. No shortage of storylines, man, including Brooks. Offensively, defensively, I think more people have their eyes pointed towards that offense. And again, we're just going to have to talk about this, just pretending like camp isn't going to be interrupted by, some announcement that football cannot proceed. But if it is, which is on track right now, then there's plenty to talk about with it. New offense, quarterback battle, which is certainly intriguing. Muschamp Lloyd at running back. How does the receiver core shake out? You need a good bit of help there. Even a couple offensive line questions, I think, but a lot of intrigue there. And biggest thing, obviously, is can you find playmakers offensively? Who wins the quarterback battle, and can you find playmakers? What can you squeeze out of that offense? And again, I think biggest question they have to answer is just the consistency. Can you be more consistently productive? Can you just be on some days average? Honestly, Wes, is what they need to be. And so this is going to be a really, really important preseason camp because they are going into year one of this offense. Did get 5 spring practices. That was great for them in terms of the timing. They did have
some people got.
Yeah. I mean, and that was a benefit of Muschamp starting spring practice a little bit earlier. It happened to work out for them a little bit. So they got that. It was a long time ago now, but they did get that. They had a summer, with workouts with Paul Jackson. Again, some new stuff there too. A lot different program than they were running before from the strength and conditioning standpoint, and then the OTAs. So all that stuff was positive for them that they got to have that. But this is a key preseason camp when you get the pads on and continue installing the offense, because offense is a huge, huge key to their potential success this year, obviously.
Yeah, no doubt. Marlon Campbell, what's up, man? Good afternoon to you as well. Dwayne has a good question for us, I think, so we'll pull that up. But when I put that question up, Chris, you can see it as well, right, on your screen, or not?
Yeah, I sure can.
Okay, sweet, awesome. So that's a good question, and I had something else to add to what you were saying, but I completely lost it. Anyway, maybe it'll come back to me. So Dwayne wants to know, give me a dark horse player on the offensive and defensive side of the ball, unexpected. And he also weighed in and said, Hank Manos, ? So, and I was actually going offensive line, Dwayne. And we've talked about this before, Chris. It's sometimes hard to even name a dark horse anymore because these guys are so covered. Like the program is so talked about that you can find somebody. You can take the entire projected starting roster, and there's somebody on Twitter or on our message boards that is like high on that guy. You know, like there's not any more, well, here's a guy you've never heard of.
Yeah, that happened.
Just does not happen.
Yeah.
So it depends on how dark horse are we going. Like, are we going, here's someone that is going to just be amazing that nobody's talking about, or here's someone that nobody's talking about at all, but is going to contribute based on, you know, a number of variables. So I'm going to say, I'll give you two dark horses on offense. One
Okay.
of them is actually Luke Doty at receiver.
All right.
Because I think one question we've seen on our message board is, okay, Luke Doty's playing some receiver. How much can he actually help? I think he can help, and I think he will help. How much, we'll see. I'm going to go super dark horse, though, with this one, and that is my belief that Jalen Nichols can also help this team at guard. And that's something you and I had talked about. Were there some tackles that could cross-train in at guard? The fact that Jordan Rhodes opted out changes the equation a little bit inside. So, point being, all these things sort of have domino effects on each other. Is Eric Douglas ready to hold down the center position? As Dwayne said, is Hank Manos ready to hold down the center position? If they are, then that's a great situation for South Carolina. If they aren't, I think that re-invites the question of sliding Javon Gwynn to center. And if that happens, I just think from a body type standpoint, and you look at the fact that Jazz Turnitin has done so well at left tackle, Dylan Wanham is back at right tackle. You still have Ja'Kai Moore who can option in at tackle. These guys always talk about offensive line as a matter of who are my best five, who's my sixth best guy. And it's not necessarily if somebody goes down at one position that it's a direct replacement. It's what gets to my best five at that point on the field. I think Jalen Nichols potentially could slide in at guard. So that's sort of my completely dark horse gut feeling. No one's even said that. Just idea of how it could play out.
There you go. I like it. I like it. You do have to get creative with the dark horse nowadays, you know. So I think there are a couple guys on each side of the ball that came to mind for me. I think the first one would maybe be Jabari Ellis defensively, who Will Muschamp mentioned him recently. A lot of talk about Pickens and Sandage. Good reason for that. But I think Jabari Ellis is a little bit of the forgotten man. You know, he had to enroll late. First year he got at South Carolina, sort of slowly has come along. But I think he's going to be counted on a little bit in there, or maybe a lot in there. And he's a guy that the staff believes has a good bit of talent. So he's one. If we're going another one defensively, Jalen Dickerson, again, sort of that key player, and that is huge if he can stay healthy. Offensively, you know, I still feel like people aren't talking about Eric Douglas enough, given that exiting the spring, he was probably number one at center. And so can you pick a potential starter as a dark horse? I don't know. But that's the rule I'll go with because a lot of people aren't talking about him. You know, he could still factor in really anywhere on the line, but particularly at center where they're trying to still find a guy. I think Muschamp mentioned him as well in there. Maybe Will Register at tight end too, man. He's not a guy that we came into the season probably with super high expectations for. I think we're talking a lot about Nick Muse for good reason. They were talking about some of these younger guys, you know, whether or not they can break in, which they certainly could. But there has been some positive stuff that you've reported about Will Register, and Will Muschamp mentioned him too recently. So he would qualify, I think, as maybe that dark horse type of guy, even though we've already been talking about him and Muschamp's mentioned him.
Oh man. All
I
right.
got you now.
Sorry, folks. We again we're using I got like that was like a minute answer that nobody could hear at all. And I just saw the
I was
four
wondering if I was the only one or whatever. So
no, I just saw the four comments talking about we can't hear you, idiot. Okay, all right. Chris, I don't even know what I said. Okay, so Jabari Ellis, I thought was a great pick. And I was gonna say, man, how interesting was it that Muschamp mentioned Jabari Ellis very early when talking about the defensive lineman? Like I pay attention to that, not just
yeah,
who he mentions matters, and the order sometimes matters as well. We've talked about Zach Pickens. We've talked about Rick Sandage, obviously. Talked about the return of Keir Thomas. But he mentioned Jabari Ellis very early in that conversation about interior defensive linemen. So that to me that matters. I would say Xavier Legette on offense is another one. Everybody knows who he is, I think, at this point. But if they're going to have the offense that they need, that we've talked about, earlier in the show, can they be, what was it, top 30? Can they be good enough productive enough to get to 500? He would fall in the category if he needs to have a big year, and he's someone I think they're hoping can have a big year is Xavier Legette. All right, so and yeah, appreciate y'all letting me know about the sound. We are, as you can see from that little marker, we're actually using a little different technology here, and I did not realize that was on me. I didn't realize I was muted. All right, Brian's got a question here. Without Clemson, what is the toughest matchup for South Carolina this year? To your point earlier, Chris, some of that will matter who you play and where in the schedule, but we do at least know what the schedule is, and we know who's home, who's away. So I think we can sort of get into this question already. Hopefully we have a full schedule with dates soon, so people can try to schedule their fall weddings, I guess. But yeah, I don't know, dude. Immediately you have to think LSU.
yeah.
I almost forget that they're on the schedule because that's just that's tough. I was thinking more East teams and Florida. I was thinking Florida or Georgia. Florida is going to be a tough game in Gainesville. A lot of people sort of have Florida. I've seen Chris nationally as like there's that word again, dark horse. They have them as a dark horse national title contender. So those are the first two that popped in my brain. So then I said, wait, they play LSU. That's the toughest game, I would say. Even with what LSU loses, that game is at LSU, right? So
It's at LSU. I mean, and that's the thing, man. They've still recruited pretty well. They still got some guys that can play for sure on all sides of the ball. They lost a ton. Joe Burrow and a couple of receivers, but they lost a ton, no doubt. So they'll have some questions too, but they still have a lot of talent on that team. And obviously, you go to Baton Rouge, and we don't know what time of day that game may be. If it's at night, you up the difficulty level by about 1,000. It just is what it is. It's a very tough place to play. Even against LSU teams that may not be that great, it's still a very, very difficult place to play. But man, there are a lot of candidates. At Florida, a dark horse, very tough game for me is at Kentucky. I think Kentucky's going to be tough to deal with this year. So
that's like a must-win type game, man, for South Carolina to get to 500 too.
There's no doubt. I mean, I look at that, and they're definitely more difficult games than there are quote unquote easy. And there's no easy games. There are no easy games. I'd probably go at LSU. That's what I would pick, just based on.
So if that's one, what's two?
If that probably at Florida, probably at Florida is what I'd go with. But I'll tell you, Kentucky's up in the upper echelon for me in terms of difficulty because it is away. I think that factors in, and I think Kentucky's got a chance. I could end up looking silly, but based on what they returned, I think they've got a chance to be pretty darn good too. And there are a lot of games that are, maybe in that toss-up category. Missouri and Tennessee and Texas A&M. A lot of a lot of games that are still going to be tough and are maybe, a little bit more towards that winnable category. But like you said, no gimmies in the schedule whatsoever. I mean, maybe you say Vanderbilt, but even then you got to go play Vanderbilt on the road.
Yeah.
You don't want that to turn into a house of horrors for you.
Yeah, Chris Clark just predicted Kentucky in the college football playoff. If y'all didn't hear him, quote him on Twitter. Yep. Sam says no mention of Georgia. I mean, yeah, we mentioned Georgia.
Oh, yeah.
Georgia, they're top 3 most difficult, I would say. It's just, is it Georgia? Is it Florida? Dude, I saw a headline. Poor Vandy. Here's the thing, guys. It can always get worse. Poor Vandy. The headline that I saw, I did not read the article, so I'm just as bad as the people I sometimes make fun of. But the headline, Chris, was, will Vandy go 0-10 this year? Oh. I'm like, geez. Like if that's the headline to start your year, that is tough, man. That is very tough. But yeah, good question, Brian. And we'll continue to break down the schedule, I'm sure, down the road. USC Light says, how much will fans factor at LSU or UF? Well, it might be not at all.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned Death Valley, and there's not going to be however many it seats very rowdy people at night. But the point still stands. I mean, still a tough place to play. It's a long trip. It's still tough. It's not going to be packed. I would go as far as to say there's no chance that the LSU's football stadium is going to be packed out for a night game of people who've been up since 5 a.m. hitting the bottle. But it'll still be a tough place to play.
I still think, Chris, we're heading towards 0 fans personally. But
yeah,
we'll see. Obviously, South Carolina put out, the number. What was it? It was like a half a fan in there in the number that they projected.
Right.
Like, I don't really know what that means, but
yeah.
So anyway, all right, that's about an hour there. We normally keep these to an hour so that you come back next time. But let's see, we got another question. Where do you see the football team in the next 4 years? That we're going to save that one for the next YouTube. That's probably a very long answer there, but we appreciate everybody joining us. All right, everybody, all at once. Put your computer screen, put the little mouse, click the subscribe button on YouTube if you have not already, because that helps us and it's free for you to do. And that way, then you can hit the bell, right, Chris? There's a bell, supposedly. I haven't seen the bell. We don't see the bell, but there's a bell for you to hit. If you hit that, then you find out when we go live. And we go live every single week. And I see you people getting off. I see our number dropping already because we've stopped talking about football. Y'all stay tight with me for a second. Hit the bell. Hit subscribe. Hit the bell because it helps us out. And thank you, USC Light, as well, for joining us. And if you are not a subscriber on GamecockCentral.com, 60 days free right now. The code, do you know the code off the top of your head, Chris? Or they got to look at the front page? You don't know. Go to GamecockCentral.com. It's right across the top, 60 days free. If you're not a subscriber, hit it. If you're already a subscriber, we love you. We appreciate you. We thank you. We may have some stuff for you as well in the future, maybe some giveaways. We can't give away stuff to all of you because there's too many of you, which is a great thing. But if you, Hugh said hit the like button. Hit the dang like button as well. Hit all the buttons. Unless there's a block button, don't hit that. But yes, if you're a subscriber, we love you. If you're a future subscriber, we love you too, because we want to go through this journey with you, the ups and downs. Come join us, 60 days free. And we're working on maybe getting some gift cards and some stuff like that to give away for our loyal subscribers who have stuck with us, Chris, through the roller coaster of football life. And I hope, for everyone's sake, that we have a football season to talk about. And if we do, we're going to talk about it right here on YouTube live as well. Chris, you got any closing thoughts, man?
Just that we appreciate all the subscribers, like you said, sticking with us. Hopefully we can get some football. Man, we've been busy, so we're going to keep pumping out content. We'll have plenty to talk about regardless. So if you're not, come and take us up on that free trial. We think you'll really, really like it, and that you'll be with us. So we appreciate everybody for listening and reading and all that good stuff.
Yep. Let's see. Fred, Hugh, USC Light, Sam, Qureshi Dowling, USC Light again, Dwayne Wilson, John Lindsay, Brian Beatty. Let's see. I know there was another one, Jason Brock, and Kelly, who let us off. Appreciate all of you. And be on the lookout. We'll be back live next week to talk hopefully about the start of South Carolina's fall camp. So we'll see you on GamecockCentral.com, and we'll see you then as well.